You're listening to the Turn Autism Around podcast, episode number 82. Today, I have a friend of mine, Tenaya Goldsmith from the Big Kahuna Swim School in Southern California. And Tenaya is going to talk to us about how to teach swimming to kids with autism and also how to teach swimming to even typically developing babies. And she talks about the 8 water safety skills she teaches and how to prevent drowning. So we are going to talk all about that. So Tenaya has been teaching swimming to kids with and without disabilities for over a decade. She is a head swim coach at a high school in Southern California, and she's a single mom of a 2-year-old who is currently learning to swim. So let's get to this important interview with Tenaya Goldsmith. So thanks for joining me today, Tenaya. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Awesome. So I know you haven't really fallen into the autism world, but I know that you do have some experience with autism. But how did you describe your fall into the world of teaching swimming, and how did you get involved with that?
Of course. So I started teaching kids when I was a kid, around 10, 11 years old. And then when I was a sophomore in high school, there was a senior that drowned because he didn't know how to swim properly. And it was a week before his graduation, which is heartbreaking for our whole community. And, even people that didn't know him well were hit pretty hard by it. So I got an opportunity after high school to start teaching swimming, and I just jumped right on it. Like, I was just all for it, and I've been doing it ever since 2008. And I absolutely adore helping families get their kids water safe so they don't ever have to have a situation like that. They don't have to ever go through something like that. And through that experience, I've been able to work with a lot of kids with special needs. And, it's incredible to me to see how amazingly smart these kids are. And we have a student right now who's 10 years old, who's autistic, and he is verbal and is the smart. He knows like 5 different languages. I'm just like blown away by him. But it's been very eye-opening to see, the different ways of how you would teach someone with autism rather than someone that doesn't have autism. But all the kids that have swam with us that are autistic are now water safe, and they're all just amazing kids.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I know that kids with autism, I don't have any statistics actually at my fingertips, but I know they have a very high rate of drowning.
Yes, they do.
Do kids in general, is that a big cause of death, drowning in general?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So for kids under the age of 5, it's the leading cause of unintentional death. So, and then for kids that are autistic, they have 160 times more likely to die from drowning than, say, a child that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So under the age of 5, typically developing kids or all kids it's the leading number 1 cause of unintentional death is through drowning. Mm-hmm. And then kids with autism are 160 times more likely to drown than their typically developing peers. Wow. Those are some crazy, scary statistics. And I know one of my former clients, Braden, about 5 years ago, he wandered away from his home and he drowned in a neighbor's pool that was left unlocked unintentionally. I don't think the neighbor was home. His gate was unlocked and unhinged, and Braden, who was 6 at the time, wandered away from his home and drowned on a sunny summer June day in the middle of the day. And it was very tragic. And I know I had asked you before you were on the show to take a look at that video, because I know one of the reasons I wanted to have you today to interview you is because I wanted to learn more to help the parents and professionals listening, not to scare them into some kind of, major stress situation. But I do know that Melissa, who is Braden's mom, I interviewed her a few years ago, and she told a very, eloquent story, a horrific story of her son's drowning. But she has gone on to promote water safety and gone on to, tell us things that she didn't know back when Braden was alive. So we are going to put that video, that link to video of me with my interview with Melissa about Braden's drowning in the show notes here. But those are really scary statistics that kids with autism are so much more likely to drown. They're usually drawn to water. I know when kids wander and go missing from homes or schools, a lot of times you need to look for the water. And I know when my son Lucas was really little, he was really very much drawn to the water too. And he went missing a few times. Luckily, it didn't end in a tragic situation like Braden, but I know a lot of families. And I've done bonus videos and podcasts and video blogs on safety, and in addition to this interview and Melissa's interview, I think, just trying to start talking about it more so that people are aware that there are things that they could do potentially. And I know another really unique thing about you, Tenaya, is that you teach both in person in Southern California, swimming lessons in person, but you also have recently added an online training school to your organization. So like, how do you teach kids to swim online? Like, what's that like?
Oh, it's really cool actually. And there's not a whole lot of swim schools that are doing this. There were pretty much none that I'm aware of that did it during our lockdown with COVID-19. But what we did is we took our training videos, which we train our instructors with. So all of our instructors that train with us watch these training videos on how to teach all of what we call the 8 basic water safety skills. And then from there, they do their in the water training. So what we're doing is we're giving parents access to those videos. So they get to watch all those videos, and it doesn't just talk about how to, do those certain skills with your kids, but it also talks about the kind of mindset you want to be in, you want your kids to be in, the things that you should be thinking about before you start swim lessons and getting in the water with your kids. And so we give them that, and then we give them access to 2 virtual swim lessons a week with me. And so I get to get on a call with them and to really fine tune some of the things that they're doing with their kids in the water. And, if they have any obstacles or challenges that they're faced with, I walk them through that. And then they also get access to our private Facebook group to where they can connect with other parents in the program. They can connect with our instructors, with myself, and they have constant access to me. So if they ever need me, they can give me a call or shoot me a text, send me an email, and I'm right there for them 100% all the time.
Wow. So when you do meet with people for virtual lessons, are the kids actually in the water?
Yes, generally speaking, they are. I encourage them to have their kids in the water so I can kind of walk through them with, if they're having trouble getting their kids to do eyes in and put their face in the water. We kind of work on that and really just step by step help them to get their kids to want to put their face in the water and learn how to hold their breath and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. I know that there are both parents and professionals and other caregivers listening to this podcast. And it's amazing. Before I kind of fell into the world of online marketing and online training, I didn't really think much about what you could teach online, but like the sky's the limit. I mean, you and I met through Jeff Walker's world of Launch Club and online training. So, but you can learn to play tennis online. You can learn to ride a horse more safely or better online. You can learn to train your dog to be in the agility performance or the agility competition world. And it's just amazing how, even something like swimming lessons can go completely online. So it's exciting
Yeah.
to know that you don't have to be exactly in the same location. You don't have to, um, and in different environments. Like I'm in Pennsylvania, so our pool season is pretty short. It's only about 4 or 5 months in length total, and that sometimes it's even shorter. And during COVID-19, a lot of the pools are even closed, making it even tougher. But I know that kids with autism often need year-round kind of education, because you can go for 9 months and then you try to get them back into the pool for swimming lessons or back into the pool in general. And it's tough to repair, especially if the child is not loving the pool, going from year to year without access to an indoor pool, for instance, where I live, or without access on a frequent basis. It can get tricky.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah.
And we're a big proponent of telling our clients, like, stick it out. Like, you need to be very consistent with swim lessons with your child, because like you said, if you go like 4 months and then they stop for a couple months, they're most likely going to regress and go backwards. And one, that's obviously it's not helpful to the child and their progression, but also for the parents, just on a financial standpoint, it's a waste of money when that happens. So I really encourage parents that if you're going to start swim lessons, just to really stick with it and to do it consistently. And for if your child is on the spectrum, to really, have that be a drawn out process, because it does take kids on the spectrum longer to learn than it would, say, a child that's not on the spectrum. So I just really encourage all clients, no matter whether your kid's on the spectrum or not, to really just stay consistent and do it until they are good to go. And our clients that have kids that are autistic stay doing lessons even after their kids are water safe. Like the one I was talking about earlier, he's the one that's 10 and he's learning stroke technique right now. He's learning how to do freestyle and streamline, which is like amazing. He's just amazing. He's an amazing kid. And so is our other student. He's also learning how to do streamline and things like that. So, and it helps reinforce what they've already learned. So keeping that consistency is super important.
Yeah. Okay. So I know with Braden's mom, Melissa, when I interviewed her about Braden's drowning, one of the things that she said she didn't know that was a big problem, and it probably led to Braden's drowning, is that she always had arm floaties on him when he was around water. So she was then learned after the drowning that, relying on life jackets or floaties is a problem, because then kids that, especially those that are naturally drawn to the water, if you turn your back or if they wander away, they're more at risk to drown. So do you also feel that way, that the floaty wings and the life jackets are an impediment to learning to swim?
Oh, definitely. Yes. We tell our clients, unless you're on a boat, do not put a life jacket or floaties on your child. You should be in the water with them, monitoring them, helping them, working on the different skills they should be working on. Because for those floaties, what happens is they promote vertical swimming. So doggy paddling, things like that, that's what it promotes. And that's not how you're supposed to be safe in the water. And the way I explain it to clients is that if you were to fall into the ocean miles off of shore and you tried to doggy paddle your way back, you wouldn't make it. You would drown before you got back. And so that's why we teach them how to put their face in the water and teach a horizontal swimming where they're rolling over and floating on their back to take a breath and relax and regain their composure and their breath, and then rolling over, putting their face in again and kicking. And if you do that all the way back to shore, you'll make it. It'll just take you a while. So it's a sustainable way of swimming. It's a safe way of swimming. And if you start putting your kids in those floaties and life jackets when they don't need to be, that will make them regress, make them go backwards, and promote that unsafe swimming that I talked about.
And the other important thing, and I do want to talk about the 8 skills that you teach for water safety. I think that would be helpful to get a general overview. But I also want to make the point that, kids can drown right with you standing there. And that it's super important that, if you do have a child that is not water safe, that you are eyes on them, in the water with them, whatever it takes to keep them safe, because it can be it is a very silent thing. Like, people think like drowning is a loud thing, and it's not. It's the child slips underwater and they could drown. So super important not to, I think that's why as parents we tend to put floaties on and stuff like that, because we know it's like hard to keep your attention on kids all the time. But it is really important to monitor the kids and not just keep an eye on them, quote unquote.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I tell parents all the time, like, I have a daughter myself, she's 2 and she's learning how to swim, and I watch her like a hawk by the pool. Like, and we have a pool fence that goes around that locks and she can't reach it. So that's good. But like, if we're by the pool or if we're by any body of water, I'm watching her like a hawk. It's like you said, it's silent. And a lot of people don't know that, is that when someone drowns, it usually is silent and you have no idea it's going on. You have no idea it's happening.
Yeah. So you said your daughter is 2 and learning to swim. What age can you teach children to swim? I think I've seen videos of babies learning to swim. Would you recommend that? Or is it ever too early or ever too late?
So it's really generally not ever too early to start teaching your child how to swim. So generally kids, from my knowledge, start to crawl around like anywhere from 6 to 10 months. They'll start to crawl. Some crawl earlier. Once they start crawling, all bets are off. They're mobile, they can get places and get there fast. So what I tell parents is, as long as their umbilical cord has healed, you should start getting them introduced to the water. Start getting them in the water, start getting them used to water on their face. At that age, they can start learning how to hold their breath, and they can do assisted back floats. But and then once they hit about 4 months old is when they're physically and developmentally capable of doing a back float by themselves. So if you get them started like after say like a month or 2 after they're born, by the time they're 4 months, you could start really working on those independent back floats. And by the time they're a year old, they could be swimming across the pool by themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you get your daughter in the pool right away?
Yeah, I started her in the water pretty early. I was unable to do the consistency because of everything that's gone on in our lives. But now she's at a point where she's rolling over and floating by herself. She's learning how to kick and all that kind of stuff. But the reason why I say start so young is because when they hit those developmental milestones, you want them to be able to, hit the ground running and be able to do those skills that align there. So like I was saying, if you start them off after their umbilical cord heals, they could potentially, by the time they start crawling, know how to roll over and float on their back. So if they were to crawl into the pool, they'd be able to roll over and float on their back and save themselves and just float there. So that's why I say get them started so young. Yes, it's going to be more time doing swim lessons, but you'll be safeguarding them at a much younger age than say like 2 or 3 or 5 or, usually when parents start their kids in swim lessons.
Okay, so let's talk about the 8 skills, if you want to just briefly tell me what they are.
Yeah, so the first skill is eyes in submersion. So we teach them how to hold their breath, how to put their face in the water. The second one is gliding, so getting them used to the water moving past them and then moving through the water. The third one is back floating, so they do a back float, catch their breath. Fourth one is rolling over, so they can actually get to their back float. And then kicking, so that's their motor, that's how they'll get around the pool. U-turns and turning around, we teach that to, if they were to ever fall into the pool, we want them to swim back to the closest wall. So if they can do essentially a U-turn in the pool or turn themselves around, they'll be able to get back to that closest wall much faster than going to the other side of the pool. And then the final two are how to get into the pool safely and get out of the pool safely. So a lot of kids like to jump in the pool, and a lot of kids jump up and straight down, and they could hit their head on the back of the pool when they do that. So we teach them to jump forward out into the pool, or to fall forward if they're sitting on the side, fall forward, how to go down into the pool via the steps, how to climb out on the steps, and how to climb out on the side of the pool.
Wow. And do you always go in that order, or do sometimes you teach a kid to float before they put their face in?
Generally speaking, we usually go in that order. In the beginning, we really try to personalize our lessons to the students, because every student learns differently. No matter if they have special needs or not, every kid learns differently. So we try to go at the kids' pace. And if they're nervous, we really try to just go slow with them and get them acclimated, get that trust and bond and respect and rapport with the child and the parents themselves as well. But yeah, we try to do things in order, but sometimes we'll mix it up. Like if there's a kid that's doing really well with eyes in, but not so much on their back float, we might add in kicking, just to give them something that they are ready for. Because if they can put their face in and glide pretty well, they can kick. So we might add in kicking, we might add in, how to fall into the pool from the side. But for the most part, we try to go in that order, because those skills do build off of each other. Like a child can't learn how to roll over until they learn how to float on their back, because what are they going to do when they roll over? They're not going to be able to do anything. So we do try to go in order as much as possible.
Yeah. And I know sometimes for kids, especially kids on the spectrum, they can, be like view things, they could be scared. My son was little. He was trauma. Well, he didn't like people, the doctor looking in his ear, and so as he got bigger, then they would like have 2 or 3 people hold him down for looking in his ear, and that kind of thing. You think like, oh, well, just hold him down. But I'm a big proponent as a registered nurse and a behavior analyst. I can see these things, not just for my son, but all the kids that I've worked with or taught their parents online, is that holding down for an ear check, for instance, could then spill over to getting a shower, or maybe the water's too hot in the shower, or, his brother was in the bathtub with him and splashed him or threw a cup of water in his face. And then suddenly now the bathtub becomes aversive. Now the swimming pool becomes aversive. And so I'm a big proponent of pairing and repairing and trying to get and keep the child in a calm state so that they can learn. Because I think if they're hysterical crying, they're obviously not going to be able to learn.
Yeah.
So do you encourage parents to bring positive reinforcers, or do you play games, or do you use modeling, or how do you get kids to, calm down and happily participate?
Well, like I said before, we really focus on gaining that rapport and that respect and that trust with the student. Like that's paramount. If we don't get that, what we're doing is all for naught, essentially. So really, especially if they are older and can communicate a little bit better, and even if they can't, trying to pay attention to their cues on when they do certain things. Like we had a student the other day who when he came up from putting his face in the water, he's like super tense, right? And his eyes were like shut closed. So that tells me that he's not comfortable with his eyes getting wet, right? And so just picking up on things like that, and I've been doing this for so long that I pick up on those things super, super fast. And so I will, automatically, if I see some type of adversity like that I know is not going to pan out well, I will automatically redirect and do something else. I'll give them a toy. I'll be like, oh, look at that bird over there. something like that. And if I can't communicate with the child, we really want to figure out what's going on in that child's head. And they will most definitely tell us. They are not shy to tell us. So if they're afraid of the pool for a certain reason, or afraid of putting their face in the water, we'll ask them, why are you afraid? What's scary about it? And if it's something,
or you can ask the parent if it's a child
yeah,
that can communicate well.
Yeah.
And I think,
Exactly.
you did tell me earlier that, a child may have had a bad experience with other swim instructors, or they may have, had almost like a near drowning experience, coming off a slide once or something. And that, I think what you're describing here is what we do for every area. Is we do an assessment, and that may involve interviewing the parent, watching the child for cues, watching their comfort level. Do they just go into the pool? Do you need to have some pool toys with you to kind of pair up the pool to make it, and you're a stranger. So involving the parents as much as needed to kind of transfer that trust. Also having, parents in the water during these online swim lessons, the parent is the main instructor, right? And working with them. And I think the more involved the parents, and this is for every skill, language, swimming, potty training, the more involved the parent is, the more generalization you'll get, and the more they can use those skills maybe to have them tolerate going from a bath to a shower, or tolerate getting their hair washed, because these are some of the same skills, putting your face under water and I think there's a lot of carryover between what we do to teach language and what we do to teach swimming.
Exactly. And when we have a new student, we always talk with the parents, like, get an idea, has your kid had swim lessons before? What's their experience in the water? Do you have a pool at home? Do you guys go in the water a lot? When you go in the water, what do you guys do? We really try to get those answers from the parents before we actually get the child into the water. And we always encourage parents to ask questions, because there are a lot of parents out there that they just don't know. They don't know what water safety skills their kids should learn. And some swim schools have weird names for them, like starfish and sea otter and things like that. And they don't actually know what the skills are. They don't know. It's called backfloating. It's called rolling over. It's called eyes in, all those kind of things. And we really...
Yeah, so the 8 skills, again, just very slowly. So it's eyes in the water. So that's like your face in the water, right? Eyes in the water. And the second one is? Gliding. So that would be like going forward.
Yeah, so just them getting used to their faces in the water. So their face would be in the water, and their front of their body would be in the water as well. So it's them moving through the water, so they can get used to how that water feels moving past them. Because sometimes that's a really weird thing for kids. They're like, what? Like, I've never felt this before.
And even a 1-year-old baby could learn to do that?
Yeah, it's mainly just them getting the feeling of it, not necessarily them gliding themselves, like pushing off a wall and doing it, but just getting used to that feeling of moving through the water.
Okay, so eyes in, gliding. What's third?
Backfloat.
Backfloat. So floating on your back. Okay, I've done that. Okay, what's the fourth?
Rolling over. So rolling over to their back float, or rolling over eyes in.
Okay, so rolling from front to back, either floating or eyes in. Okay, got that. Fifth one is?
Kicking.
Okay.
Yeah. And then U-turns and turning around.
U-turns and turning around, okay, to get to the wall.
And then getting in the pool safely, and then getting out of the pool safely.
Okay. And do you focus a lot on getting to the wall?
Yes. So the first thing that we want them to be able to do is, if they were to fall into the water, just to roll over and have a stable back float, to be able to float there and whatnot. Because if they can do that, they can float there. And if their parents come out, whoever comes out, they see them, they're floating, they're fine, they're waiting to be picked up. So that's the first thing that we want them to know how to do and to master. After that would be roll over, float on your back. Okay, now go eyes in, find the wall, and swim back to it and get out.
Okay. Yeah. And what age would a child have to be to get to a wall and get out?
Around 2 is when they're physically able to pull themselves out of the water. If they've been working on it until then, we'll work on them getting out of the pool to help build up their muscles and things like that. So once they hit that 2-year mark, they usually have the strength to pull themselves out of the pool by themselves.
Wow, that's amazing. I know that I've seen videos. I've seen some of your videos where you're teaching babies to swim and go underwater and stuff. It's just amazing to me how early and how kind of instinctual it is to swim, and that it's not this just far off idea that you could actually teach your child to be a swimmer and to be safe around water, which is really the goal. Now, for those of parents and professionals out there, we also want to mention that kids can also drown in hot tubs and even in bathtubs and in buckets of water and baby pools outside. And so it's not just swimming pools or the ocean. Do you have experience with that, or do you give guidance to parents on how to watch those other water sources?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of safety measures, putting safety measures in place to protect your child against things like that. Like if your child's in the bathtub, don't take your eyes off of them, just stay in there with them, get prepared ahead of time, stay in there with them, don't walk away. And then if, say, it's outside, there's a little kiddie pool, again, be there with them. Make sure that when they're done, you dump out the water, you put it away, all that good stuff. You don't want to leave stuff out there like that, right? You don't want to leave those potential dangers out there. And if they have a pool, they should get a pool fence that their kids can't get into the pool. And those are pretty easy to find. You can get people that can install them for you too. And we have one here that my daughter can't unlock or anything like that because she's not tall enough yet. And they're, that when we got that, because my daughter was crawling before we even got the pool fence. And once we got that, I was like, oh my God, it was a huge relief to know that we had that safeguard in place where she couldn't get over there. She's completely blocked off. So once your kids know those skills, those 8 basic water safety skills, if they're in the bathtub and they slip and fall forward, they'll roll over and float. Once they have that, as they've mastered those skills, it becomes instinct, it becomes second nature. So they'll automatically do that, but you don't want to even have that type of situation in the first place. So just making sure you watch them, and if you are done with the kiddie pool, put it away. If there's a bucket of water outside, just dump it out. It'll take you 10-15 seconds to do that. And it's much easier to do that than having to go through a loss of a child.
Yeah. And if you own a pool or your neighbors own a pool, make sure you talk to them and talk to your spouse and the lawn guy and the pool maintenance people about the importance. Make sure you have a good locking mechanism that locks itself, or everyone is on it, so that the gates aren't propped open and that there's no, oh, well, it's Tuesday, so the gate's open because the lawn guys forgot to close it. And that, I think, is also a big responsibility of anybody with a pool or a hot tub or any kind of water situation, because you don't want to, leave liability open to you. And it's just such a heart-wrenching situation when a child drowns anyway, but if it was because your gate was open, it's just double heart-wrenching. So I think it's really important that you educate other neighbors and yourself and whoever has pools. I know in Southern California where you live, it's quite common. In Pennsylvania, when our season is pretty short, it's not as common, but I think educating and just being aware Also to note that kids with autism might also have seizure disorders, and I've known at least one child to have died having a seizure in a hot tub. So, just because they can swim when they're conscious doesn't mean that they're not going to have a seizure and, risk drowning as well. So it's a good idea to always, even for you or I, it's a good idea to always swim with a buddy. Just in case of an accident or an emergency or a seizure or something like that. So I think that's also another good thing to mention.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you. I don't think that anyone should swim by themselves. You should always have someone there, always. And especially with a child, you're talking about the child that had a seizure disorder. If they have any sort of disorders like that, you always need to be you need to be aware, you need to be taking extra precautions and, just being really present in that moment with them, because I've had friends who have had seizures or have been epileptic, and they have to take extra precautions all the time to make sure that they're safe and everything like that. So always having someone there with you, and I'll go swimming with my daughter sometimes. The majority of the time we have my parents out there too with us, just in case, I don't think something's going to happen, but just in case something were to happen, we want that extra security there, that extra help and support that will help in a situation like that.
Yeah. So this has been a very enlightening episode, kind of a little on the depressing side, talking about drowning, but if we can prevent drowning and get our kids water safe, I think it's hugely important. So part of my podcast goals are to for parents and professionals to be less stressed and lead happier lives. So do you have any self-care tips or stress reduction strategies that you use? Not even related to swimming, just, how do you keep yourself, to be less stressed?
Man, oh, that's good. Lately it's been tough with the current situation in the world, but usually I meditate. So I do a lot of meditation throughout the week and just a lot of thinking. I read too. I listen to audiobooks, and that's very calming and just helps me kind of get back to ground zero and get my thoughts in order and things like that. So those are the big two things that I do.
Yeah.
I also just love the water. So if I'm in the water, I'm pretty good.
Good. So you meditate, you read, listen to audiobooks, and you swim for stress reduction. I think those are excellent ways. So how can people find out more about your online course, or if they happen to be in Southern California, your in-person classes? How can they find you? What's your website?
It's bigkahunaswim.com. And that has all of our information about virtual swim lessons and in-person swim lessons.
So bigkahunaswim.com, and you spell Kahuna, Kahuna.
Yep.
And we will link that in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for your time today, Tenaya.
Thank you so much.
I learned a lot. And we know that kids with autism are much more at risk for drowning, and there are ways to teach them to be safe around water. So thanks so much for your expertise in this area.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me today, Mary.